Welcome to the X-Files, where today we look at a more recent Shonen Jump manga that got cancelled despite receiving an outpour of love from many fans. Let's boot up its file. Full name, MamaYuyu, created by Yoshihiko Hayashi, start date September 11th, 2023, end date April 8th, 2024. Total chapters 29, plus 5 bonus chapters totaling to 34 chapters. For the English translation, we have a few people to thank, including David Evelyn for translation, Finn Kay for lettering, Ian Miller for design, and Urian Brown for editing. Onto our bio for Yoshihiko Hayashi. They are a newer mangaka to the scene, but have been quite prolific in the time they've been around. In the volumes of MamaYuyu, they bring up drawing since a young age, with them starting to practice very hard at the beginning of high school and haven't stopped since, which is evident by the wide slate of one-shots they've published in the years since then. Curiously, I think the first recorded work I can find from them isn't an official one-shot though, but a Tokyo 7th Sisters doujinshi or fan art book, with that series being a musical rhythm game about idols. For their first one-shot, Hayashi would create Lovely Runners High as an entrant in Jump's New World Manga Award that would see a widespread release in Jump Plus in July of 2021, with it later being republished in Jump Giga's autumn issue of 2021. This is a sports cross romance story about two kids named Keiichi and Miharu who both run track and field, with the latter aiming to reach the national level and Keiichi trying to catch up to her. In Hayashi's first outing, we see their penchant for emotional stories that interweave tragic and romantic elements. The focus on people growing up and youth is another thing that will crop up again and again too. Following this, Hayashi would enter the 101st Tezuka Award with Octokill, getting an honorable mention, but sadly this hasn't been published anywhere from my knowledge. But its premise is that some kind of aliens have invaded in the year 2035, and unlike a lot of his other one-shots by Hayashi, this is a battle manga. More competitions would follow, as next, Ii ni kaita mochi wo kaita mochi, or Making a Pie in the Sky, would be an entrant for the 2022 Gold Future Cup, featured in issue 43 of Weekly Shonen Jump 2022, losing to Koi no Yobi no Sasaki-san, which I've mentioned in quite a few videos before. Even though it wouldn't win the competition, this is a brilliant one-shot about two girls, Shinomiya and Konami, one who plays the trumpet and another who draws, and how their actions affect and inspire one another. Again, this has a dramatic emotional focus, but there's clear improvement here, with Hayashi illustrating some fantastic spreads and their art style really coming into its own. The focus on sound in particular in a purely visual medium is definitely something worth noting as well. Hayashi always attempts to get creative within the bounds of the manga format, and this is a great early example of this. Next, we would then see Heno Heno Moheji Tobo Ningen to Pantsu, or Learning to Draw a Goofy Face, Stick Figure and Undies, which would be released in Jump Plus in October of 2022. Conceptually, this is a weirder entry by Hayashi that follows the main character who has a disease where everyone perceives them as a stick man. The one-shot follows their relationship with the world around them, and most notably their bully, which sparks a romance. The art here is creative, fun, and we see elements of light erotic humor, which would be present in future works. In the span of just 2 years, Hayashi had amassed a portfolio of strong work that are great exhibitions of his stranglehold over emotional stories. Each one made me feel something, and it's usually a bittersweet combination of feelings. This is helped greatly by his artwork, which is expressive and very unique, which I'll go on to mention more as we evaluate today's main topic, which is MamaYuyu, debuting a year after Hayashi's last one-shot in Shonen Jump issue 41 of 2023. MamaYuyu begins by introducing us to a world of heroes and demons, but things are less fantastical and more peaceful than you might initially expect. Instantly, the story flexes its creativity with this dense double-page spread depicting the main character Coolio walking through town, and afterwards we're treated to an interview section that leads into some of the most expressive paneling we've ever seen in Jump as the chapter progresses. The way MamaYuyu plays around with its format, in both how it frames situations like through the interview and how it panels everything, makes it very fun to read. This is something I want to get across as quickly as possible, and anyone who has read the manga will likely mention this aspect of it right off the bat. Equally as important though is who we will be following throughout the story. Kollio, we quickly learn, is the current hero of this world, and at all times there will be one hero and one demon king, which in this case is Mamama, his mother figure, who he has a tenuous relationship with at the moment. He was born after the previous hero, Halo, sacrificed himself to end the war between heroes and demons once and for all. As such, in this age of peace, not much is thought of Kollio, and people don't even seem to remember his name correctly. His role as a hero isn't very necessary, and seeds are planted here as one of the things MamaYuyu is trying to explore is the notion of what a hero even is. Through Kollio, heroism as an idea is tackled. He is conflicted about that role and label. What does it mean to him? Should he live up to it? What does he need to do to live up to that moniker? Beyond becoming a hero, I think there's also a general coming of age journey going on here, where Kollio is questioning his purpose, which is pretty natural for a young adult of his age. The peaceful times begin to change though, as a hero from a different world manifests in Kollio's, Evan Allgreen, who brings with him the news that it's likely a demon lord will follow him to this world as well. Through Evan, we get his perspective on heroism and info on the manga's power system, sigil sorcery. Each hero and demon king should have an individual power which ties into the symbol on their hands, though Kollio's is yet to manifest and he's never heard about this before. The series will dig into this as it progresses. Evan also tells Kollio he must search for his own answers regarding heroism and not seek them from others, further pushing that this is a story about Kollio finding himself. Upon rereading this, it's really apparent as MamaYuyu has a lot of scenes full of dialogue between Kollio and other characters. There's as much yapping as there is fighting, and it lends a certain richness to the characters despite the series' short length. As typical as Kollio is a modern shonen battle protagonist, how he's explored is pretty engaging. We get to see him change bit by bit and ponder what the many other characters of the story convey to him. In the initial chapters, one of the characters he interacts with the most is Mamama, his mother. She's someone who has had the life experience Kollio hasn't. She was there when the Age of Peace was formed and only wants the best for Kollio, but in hyper-focusing in that, she looks past the unique issues Kollio faces by being branded a hero and the more broad issue of him not understanding his place in the world. Their chat in the first chapter, where they both open up and Kollio says maybe he shouldn't have been born, is almost the crux for everything in the entire story that will be revisited by the end. There's a realness to this dialogue, and I love this page in particular that's cyclically laid out. I think it's purposely made like this so your eyes wander a bit and loop around, as at this juncture, Kollio doesn't know how to respond to his mother after she's so emotionally open with him. Thoughts regarding important conversations or big questions like, what is my purpose, can often be confusing and cyclical. I think this is a beautiful artistic representation of that. Something else that prevents Kollio from properly responding is the advent of another demon lord entering their world. The one that's followed Evan, Demon Lord End. The world is engulfed in shadow, its presence makes people hemorrhage, blood pouring out of them due to its intense pressure. End is an amalgamation of facial features, hands and flesh that seems borderline obsessed with Evan, who mentions that this is only a fraction of its true size and power, so it's the perfect opportunity to kill it. But alongside doing this, Evan remarks that it's also the perfect time to kill Kollio as well, to assume his position of the hero of this world as he has nowhere to return to. The conversation of what it means to become a hero resumes here, with Kollio finding out at least an initial answer to that question. A hero is someone who is always protecting something, which he does. Despite Evan's pretty evil intentions in taking his place, Kollio pushes Evan out of the way and saves his life. Maybe it's because he's been labelled one over and over, or it's besides that fact, Kollio realizes as he dies that a hero is something he might have always wanted to be, which is why he acted on this final heroic impulse. Evan, seeing this act, is taken aback. We only get to know snippets about him here, that the world he lived in was a harsh, uninhabitable one, one in which he killed friend and foe alike. He lost his heart, but sees Kollio still possesses his and has the will to protect others. He realizes that it'd be better if the burgeoning hero Kollio lives instead of himself, so he sacrifices his life. Kollio then wakes up to a crying Mamama, and the stage is now set for this reverse Isekai that will see Kollio's vision of heroism challenged by numerous visiting heroes and demons. Despite all of what's occurred, this is just the very beginning, so Coolio is still doubtful of his position and is still searching for what being a hero means to him. Different elements throughout the series are tackled that pertain to heroism or Coolio's search for purpose. Protecting others, receiving praise or thank yous from others, attaining power and attaining allies are some of the things touched on. Self-sacrifice is another one which is touched on, and this feeds into Mama's protective behavior, as she doesn't want to see Coolio hurt like the prior hero whom she loved. I think you can also parallel this with her not wanting Coolio to leave the nest, so to speak, while also recognizing now that she needs to let him grow, since he is his own person and needs to make sense of his place in the world. And what better way to leave the nest than to go on a massive quest to meet other heroes and demons, plus a training arc since Coolio needs to get stronger, which he does under the supervision of Pyreglow. He's a bit of an underused character, but I enjoy whenever he does pop up. While the two train, he relays the info about the series' core premise again, that heroes and demons from other worlds are gathering in this one, and they already have one in custody, the hero Alicia Woolpool, who has an immaculate design with this super fluffy hair, and Coolio is immediately taken aback by her because he lacks experience with girls. Some people have expressed confusion with the inclusion of romance elements in the series, though I think it works considering that learning about yourself often means meeting new people and forming new connections, which can include romantic ones. The initial meeting between these two is a bit of a disaster, but I love that it's rectified by Coolio telling Alicia, who is running away, that running through a red traffic light means she'll die. It's a funny joke for one, it's true to an extent, it's the type of rule that exists for her own safety, but he's also taking advantage of her not knowing anything about this world. The expressions the two make really sell it too. I'm not one for explaining jokes wholesale, but I did want to bring this one up as the series can be surprisingly funny at times. MamaYuyu continues by introducing a variety of demons and heroes, all of which are from different worlds, and now is as good a time as any to run through some. We've just brought up Alicia, the bubbly fish out of water hero, but she has a counterpart we meet in the next arc, Kuptula, a demon lord with ice powers who fights against Coolio and Alicia in a tag team match at one point. Escaba is another demon lord who joins up with Coolio and betrays them pretty much instantly. Despite the short time frame for his introduction, I feel like it works since just prior there's this talk about trust and his motivations, which does endear you to him. And this goes on to further differentiate the different types of people who are warping into Coolio's world. Some are amicable, like Alicia, some might be flat out surface level evil, but Escaba is much more conniving and tricky, which is reflected in his shadow-based power, which he uses to defenestrate Coolio. Since we're covering him, the first fight with Escaba, I think, is a really good instance of one of MamaYuyu's strengths. I seldom comment on fights in manga as they're not really what I read for, but I appreciate a level of strategy and tactical consideration, and this fight exhibits just that. Gradually, we've been building the idea of sigil stocks. Everyone's sigil powers have limited uses, which is important to think about during fights. And Escaba's powers rely on shadow, so Coolio goes on to break nearby lights to quell them, making his powers useless. It's simple but smart and illustrated very well with a lot of momentum. Moving on, Escaba's parallel hero is another example of a character being pretty different. Even though they are a hero, they are difficult to deal with, and for a period act as an adversary. Ralfred is a hero who still has his prejudices of demon lords still intact and isn't easy to win over. The arc featuring him explores the idea that different heroes and demons possess different cultures and beliefs, foreign to Coolio's, which feeds into MamaYuyu's broader narrative of the characters finding their selves or purpose. Minerva, a fan favorite, battles with Ralfred and is a demon lord on the good guy's side. She's a demon martial arts idol, and yes, I'm aware that's the coolest thing ever, and she's from a world where humanity has been completely wiped out. But in this scenario, she recognizes which side is fighting for peace and joins Coolio. Pitting her up against Ralfred is great. We get to confront his prejudice, and both characters are so hot-blooded it lends itself to an excellent brawl. She further enhances her fight with her sigil sorcery too, which creates these little kira sparklies which draw people's attention. Within the manga itself, this is used to great effect in the paneling in some almost fourth wall breaking ways that draw your eyes to the sparkle effects, just like her enemies are drawn to them as well. It's really impressive in how creative this is. Characters possessing these unique abilities that reflect their personalities also adds to the idea of every character being different. Their perspectives and beliefs are all varied, and Coolio comprehending and learning about them to become a fuller human, as well as to understand what his definition of a hero is something I feel adds a lot to the series if you take this perspective. So far, it sounds like absolute chaos with how I'm explaining things and with how many characters there are duking it out, but there is someone behind the scenes orchestrating this chaos who has popped up in the backgrounds of multiple chapters before his reveal, a trope I really like. Grisha is our main villain of the story. He acts with whimsy, treating the events that unfold like his toy box, and is pretty manic in his goals, having allied himself with Demon Lord End from the beginning of the story. One of my favourite aspects about him is, in contrast to Coolio, who is trying to understand the characters he meets no matter their affiliation, Grisha actively preys on prejudice and differences to create conflict. For the heroes of the story, it's an uphill battle as they have to build trust and acceptance between each other. I think throughout there is this through line or idea that's explored of the good or kindest outcomes being the hardest to reach, or ones that take a significant amount of effort, while some outcomes that are the easiest have caveats that hurt others either directly or through being part of a broken system, like every world being split into heroes and demons, which tends to breed conflict. In Coolio's world, this split has been dealt with, and there's peace, but other worlds aren't so fortunate, like the world of the Demon Lord Monica and hero Sadako. These two are introduced in a later arc, which sees Coolio and co gather allies for a future assault on Grisha's base. Monica is a demon lord who the group managed to apprehend in a prior fight. She's a young girl who has the ability to turn into various animal forms, who was manipulated by Grisha due to how young and impressionable she was. Sensing Coolio's good nature, she accompanies him and Alicia to a theme park where we get a really fun little arc with a little downtime, but we also get to learn a bit more about her world and Sadako too, who resides in a haunted house. The question of what a hero is also brought up here again, directly and indirectly both through Sadako, who is far from your prototypical hero. Ghost powers, a villainous appearance, and someone who accepted the easy status quo of her world. One which doomed every demon lord to die by age 10, which includes Monica. What's heroic about capitulating to a system that murders children at the cost of peace? The series doesn't dwell on this much, but it is there in the background, and I admire at least it attempting to make a hero that's so wishy-washy like Sadako, who might not have had the courage or knowledge to stand up to her world's flawed systems. When asked by Coolio about heroism, she posits the idea that a hero is someone with allies, friends who will always have their back due to a deep well of respect and admiration. And while this is speculation, perhaps Sadako is someone without this and had no one to confront her lack of action, leading to her reclusive nature. Many might cite this arc as MamaYuyu's weakest, but it's still clearly working through its themes, building characters, and providing us with different challenges for our heroes to overcome. A prime case for this is the little training arc. With Sadako's help, we get to see Coolio fight against the world's old heroes, figures Coolio respects, ones he thinks embody heroism from a historical perspective. So it's fitting that he, a prospective hero, struggling with what that moniker means for him, gets to fight them. It both challenges him physically and mentally, both his strength as a character from this will grow, and his literal character as he's engaging with his arc's core theme of answering what a hero is. With training done, it's now time to start the final arc, an assault on Grisha's headquarters. Before the main event though, we actually have a few bonus chapters to start in. MamaYuyu's original run was actually 29 chapters long, but with the volume release, 5 brand new chapters were added. 3 at the very end and 2 in between chapters 24 and 25, rearranging things slightly, but it's as if these chapters always existed and were planned, to be honest, as all they really do is flesh out the characters and add other fights we didn't get to see in the weekly Jump release. We get to see Iskaba and Ralfred's showdown, which is cool, but ultimately it ends with them talking, working things out through understanding and not violence. Beyond just Coolio, I love that the series practices what it preaches and offers supplementary characters with arcs that build on this idea of coming to an understanding with others, not through violence but through compassion. After these chapters, Grisha vs. Coolio takes center stage, and Coolio has vastly improved beyond Grisha's expectations with his catalogue of new sigil sorceries. But something else has been brewing which overshadows the both of them, which is the fragment of Demon Lord End that's attached itself to Grisha. In an amazing sequence, it appears out of the darkness. The conventions of the manga and space are played around with here, which give way to some lavish, hyper-detailed illustrations of the grotesque End. A mass of flesh, screaming to see Evan once more. Coolio isn't alone in this confrontation though, as before he gets to approach End, he first gets a pep talk and an explanation of what's been going on behind the scenes by his predecessor Halo Halo. Halo Halo has a sigil sorcery that lets him erase and recreate things. He used this to erase a few things from his world, the world Coolio and Mamama are from, namely the concept of weaponry and the concept of sigil sorceries, in an attempt to make a more peaceful world, which ended with him succeeding. There's some really nice discussion here by the characters in Halo Halo about him wanting to believe in humanity, which he uses as a justification for wholesale not removing concepts like violence and anger, thinking that we as people have some inherent good and will be able to talk things out and understand each other. Alongside this question of what a hero is, MamaYuyu ties in violence and how we approach conflict, and that becomes most evident from this point onwards. Classically, a hero beats the Demon Lord through violence. Conflict ends when one side is vanquished. There is some dialogue where Halo Halo states, "There's no goal that's more clear-cut than malice." I think the manga has shown this idea well by the ease at which Grisha assembled people through hatred versus Coolio having a much harder time convincing his allies to fight alongside him. Building on this, Coolio's influence ends up extending to his friends who also seek more difficult but peaceful solutions to conflict through talking, like Ralfred with Escaba. There's a lot of this throughout the manga, and I think it tackles the idea of facing conflict through discussions quite well, in a way that's not overly saccharine or cheap. There's the recognition that a bunch of the cast have lived through some pretty harrowing events that's led to the mindsets they possess when we're introduced to them in the story. So many times are these characters the victims of a lack of communication or of a larger societal force or pressure. But I think what it ends up saying is that these aren't the faults of the individual, and we can move past them or choose how they affect us going forward. We have the capacity to forgive or seek a better solution by trying something new. MamaYuyu then showcases one more instance of humanity's darkest depths, of how our apathy, hatred, and tendency to pick the easiest option can lead to atrocity. But at the same time, it also shows that there is hope beyond these events, that we can do better, and this wraps back around to Demon Lord End and the hero Evan. I've mentioned sigils a bit throughout this video. Demons and heroes alike have them, and with them they use different sorceries. It's the battle system. Depending on when they get these, at what age, basically their powers will vary in strength, with the strongest being what's known as a mother sigil, sigils that form while a baby is still yet to be birthed. In Evan and End's world, humans and demons remain divided, and when the human side birthed the hero with a mother sigil, the demons took initiative to get a demon with a mother sigil of their own, so they wouldn't be defenseless. This is the "you have a gun so I have to have a gun" approach, or "your country has a nuke so we have to have one too." The problem here is these sigils only manifest when a previous sigil holder, in this case a demon lord, dies, and generally sigil holders are always children, but mother sigils are exceedingly rare. Artificially producing one would require the systematic slaughter of these child sigil bearers one by one until a mother sigil could be birthed, and no individual or government in their right mind would ever do this, right? So, after 3,800 attempts, 3,800 slaughtered children, End is the result. A demon with a motherless sigil. It doesn't end there though, with her backstory further mentioning torture as a way to get her to react when she wouldn't do anything due to the insane levels of trauma that resulted in her conception. It's unapologetically bleak, perhaps too much, too edgy for some, but I think it does well to get across the wanton cruelty broader institutions or groups of humans can inflict to attain some sort of power or advantage. Despite all of this, for a period of time, End manages to survive, and that's because of a chance meeting with the hero Evan after an escape attempt. That spark of kindness and camaraderie they share for a brief moment keeps it going, until she hears of Evan's passing, which is when she breaks and kicks off the events of the series. She revives Evan with her sorcery, one that lets her revive the dead, potentially explaining the amalgamation of bodies she is or is representing all the dead children that were the prerequisite for her birth, a chilling thought. Evan, now revived, then uses his sorcery to warp out of this broken world, finding himself into Coleo's with End following suit, which leads back to the very beginning of the manga. Later on we get a bit more on Evan and learn of how constrained he felt due to the burden of the powers he'd been bestowed with. He distanced himself from others as to not hurt them, but due to this and him not reaching out or staying longer with End, it led to the worst possible outcome. It's not something either are at fault for. The horrible circumstances thrust upon both of them led to this. The very idea of heroes and demon lords, the sigils, the structure and governments of the world taking advantage of these titles are to blame here. Coleo gets to confront End after this, and there isn't a fight, just a discussion about all of this, revealing End's backstory and the fact that Coleo was brought back using End's sigil sorcery, Corpse Conclave. To explain things further, just in case you haven't read or have forgotten things, since it does get a bit confusing here, Coleo's powers throughout the story aren't his, they're Evan's, and Evan's sigil sorcery was the ability to copy and keep multiple sigil sorceries, explaining the levitation, teleportation, healing, and fire, while everyone else only ever had one. To resurrect Coleo after he died in chapter 1, this sorcery was used by Evan, mimicking it from End, tying Coleo to End, so if she passes on, so will Coleo. End, full of grief, remarks, much like Coleo at the beginning of the series, that her existence is one that only brings misfortune to others and that she should have never been born. But her existing, her powers being used to resurrect Coleo, let him meet new friends and come to terms with the fact that his peaceful life with a loving mother is something incredibly blessed. Coleo being here and talking to End is also proof that her power is capable of saving others and enriching their lives, even if she is partially the cause of his initial death. She also never asked for any of this, and ultimately her goal was just to see Evan, to feel loved and understood. So following that logic, Coleo transfers Evan and his powers back to End so that they can be reunited. He then falls back down to Earth, and we wrap up our other major plot thread, Grisha. Grisha is kind of odd, and I feel is the real victim of MamaYuyu's cancellation, but him being less fleshed out makes some level of sense since he's meant to be a rather shallow character. He's a dimensional patrol member, presumably someone who was assigned to deal with End and Evan, who broke continuity, but he ends up taking things into his own hands, seeing it as his opportunity to grow in strength so he can just lord over every dimension. Sometimes it's okay to have simpler villains like this, especially if they work as the thematic antithesis of your protagonist. He is someone who wants power for power's sake, who will trample on others no matter what, and always resorts to malicious and violent means. As much as Coleo wants to talk people down, and he does try, he tries with Ralfred, Escaba, Sadako, N to varying degrees. In this case, we are presented with someone who will not listen to reason and doesn't care, so it does come down to a fight. It's a quick one, but it involves everyone, and the focus for the most part is on minimizing damage to the surrounding area because Grisha summons these two massive warships, which is so out of left field, and I wonder if it has any significance I'm overlooking. It's a cool spectacle though, and it lets the manga focus on something beyond just beating Grisha, saving people, doing something non-violent, showing it's still considerate of what it's trying to preach. With the help from his friends, Coleo gets a straight shot to Grisha and activates his very own sigil sorcery. What his sorcery does, Shishi Rinrin Loyal Lionheart, is it allows him to open up a space in someone's spirit or psyche so he can communicate, so there's still an attempt to converse even if it devolves into a psyche battle where Coleo is joined with the spirits of Halo and Evan. It's not easy to understand each other. We're all different humans, we're different so we clash. That's why we talk things out. But you don't listen to anybody, you just take liberties and hurt people. I love this line. It just kind of encapsulates everything MamaYuyu is about. It might be a little surface level, it kind of tells you straight to your face, but I kind of admire that as well. we're different, we believe in different things, and that's ultimately going to lead to conflict. But we can talk to each other, we can try to hash things out. Maybe we won't reach a full resolution, but as long as we don't capitulate to hate, then maybe we can all get through this together. Sadly, Grisha refuses to play the game. He doesn't engage at all. In this case, what can you do when you've reached out and get no response back? It's really this age-old dilemma when you're writing a story about violence or conflict of any kind. At some point you reach a wall with someone where they won't listen. Maybe you'll find this unsatisfying, but I admire the attempt MamaYuyu makes to meaningfully tackle conflict through the entire series. Ultimately, Grisha is defeated, but that spells the end of everything, as the dregs of End merge with Grisha fade, and so does her corpse conclave sorcery keeping Coolio alive. With nobody else knowing about this, everyone says goodbye before they go back to their own worlds. A kiss is exchanged by Alicia and Coolio, which results in some super goofy expressions. It's a very endearing but bittersweet moment, and suddenly, after a very brief goodbye, they're all gone. Coolio then soon follows. He passes on in Mamama's arms, but not before saying that he was glad that she was his mother in a really emotional final scene. There is one last chapter after this that takes us back to the meeting of Evan and End, but there's one slight difference. As Evan goes to leave, he gets a brief flash of Coolio and turns back to ask for End's real name. It's Citrus. The butterfly affixed to End's head that's always been there flies off, rippling through space and time into a repeating of the very first chapter. Our actions, the things we do and say towards others, have consequences and ripples. This is a very blatant nod to the butterfly effect, but it also refers to the simple fact that reaching out to others can help. Communicating and reaching an understanding can help us avoid tragedy. Coolio runs through the motions, gets misidentified, talks to Mamama, helps a kid who's being bullied, just like in chapter 1, and as he walks into the crowd he hears a thank you. Honestly, the last few additional chapters of MamaYuyu took my breath away, and I think they elevate this story a lot. It's such a shame that they weren't in the Jump release, and most people are unlikely to read them unless they buy its volume release, which you should do. If you want an explanation, I can see the butterfly being a member of the Dimensional Patrol who's fixing some irregularities, which has been hinted at earlier. It being here certainly makes the ending a lot less bleak, and it gives us a nicer end, something quaint that reinforces some of its ideas. The simple act of sharing your name or uttering a thank you can go miles in improving one's day or even life. In the same vein, I think Coolio admitting he loves his mother is another very important instance of this. To me, the ultimate answer of what a hero is that MamaYuyu suggests is someone who is kind. It doesn't have to be in a big or grand way, just be kind, do the best you can, and even through actions like telling your loved ones how grateful you are about them, can you be a hero too? Building on the ideas of being a hero, I think MamaYuyu goes beyond just asking the question and discusses the nature of the role and you having that title or label. Throughout the story, being born a hero or demon is pretty universally a bad thing. You're thrust into conflict or a society that will take advantage of you, martyr you, or straight up kill you just because of who you were born as. Characters are defined by their roles in some cases, which overshadows who they are. Citrus having their name obscured as End the entire time is pretty emblematic of this. Her fate and Monica's are pretty harrowing. Being part of these mass sacrificial ceremonies, they demonstrate humankind at its most mechanical and evil. Minerva being sold due to the title she was born with is pretty messed up too. Even in a world where there's some level of peace since one side wiped out the other, that title of Demon Lord still drags someone down despite it being useless effectively. Sadako capitulating to society that would sacrifice Monica I think is a good instance of apathy, of acknowledging the faults of the system but not changing anything since there's some kind of easy piece that's working so far. Alicia and Captula are two sides of the same coin who have lost a mother and daughter respectively to the worlds they live in due to the hero and demon system. It's proof that both sides suffer just as much as each other. Ralfred and Escaba is maybe the most clear cut, where we get to see that despite these two sharing a similar love and person they treasure, their roles sow disharmony and divide them. I wish it did play into these cautionary elements a bit more, since by its end it still embraces Corleo becoming a hero, and on the flip side it doesn't really explore the Demon Lord portion. I would have loved to see people grappling with being defined as evil just because of the sigil they received. Seeing each of the worlds get revisited by their original heroes and demons and how they might change going forward would have also been pretty interesting. There's a lot of depth there potentially, and it could have made for an excellent epilogue if the series lasted much longer. It's understandable based on the amount of chapters we did get that none of this happens, but it is something I think about which this series could have delved into more if it was longer, and does show that there is room for growth in how it explores its ideas. I tried to inject a lot of analysis or thematic exploration within the story summary this time because I feel like MamaYuyu had a lot it wanted to say. It may not be the most cohesive, but for a cancelled work that was constrained by how many chapters it received, even with the extra ones, I think it does a good job at touching on a variety of topics, and it interweaves them with its characters well. For me to be able to write so much on it and have had a pretty emotional reaction to what it was trying to say, I think there's a level of success there. MamaYuyu's core ideas got to me, and that's not something that always happens with finished works, never mind the stories I usually cover here on the X-Files. Beyond MamaYuyu's story and themes, there are other elements I really want to touch on, namely its artwork. Usually I'll pepper some discussion about his art throughout the video, but MamaYuyu is really special and I want to make sure I talk about its art in a bit more depth in its own little section. First of all, anyone who reads it will tell you how playful the series is visually, which is especially apparent to its paneling. MamaYuyu doesn't shy away from being experimental. Granted, it might not get as weird as other manga, but for Shonen Jump standards, it's pretty special. Earlier, I brought up a lot of things it does in chapter 1 visually, like its interview at the beginning or any scene involving End, but page by page it feels different. A part of this can be attributed to its high panel density. Commonly pages might have 10 panels or be segmented in this cool way, almost like some kind of puzzle. This allows the manga to have many smaller expressions or establishing shots, which alongside its plentiful dialogue help the manga get more out of its shorter length. Usually this comes at the cost of bad pacing or poorer, smaller illustrations, but in this instance I feel like Hayashi knows what he's doing and takes advantage of these packed pages. He knows what expressions to use and what scenery or close-ups to include to enhance the page flow and your reading experience. A lot of the time you'll be presented with pages where a single character has many different expressions and it's almost as if they're animated. You fill in the blanks in your head, and this jump from one emotion to another leads to the characters feeling richer and better realized. Stylistically, I think MamaYuyu rules too. All of Hayashi's character designs stand out with different faces, hairstyles and clothing, but it's all cohesive. It's poppy and energetic, something which can be applied to its paneling and page construction too, as I've mentioned throughout this video. This energy is also present in MamaYuyu's lettering. Sound effects in MamaYuyu often wrap into its scenes and visual style. One part of the manga that always stuck with me is during Alicia's backstory, when rain pours down, you get these raindrops. Yet these aren't just normal raindrops, but sound effects for the rain itself. It's super creative and clever. Sound effects will often be pretty pivotal in a visual sense during fights as well, as they help frame action and contribute to page flow, pushing your eyes in the intended reading direction. I think lettering and type is often overlooked by readers, but it's a very important aspect of comics and manga, as well as visual art overall. Through the process of making this video, I got to chat with the English letterer of MamaYuyu, Finn K, who is an avid fan of the series and was super pleasant to talk to. He clarified some things about the lettering process, and we got to talk about how much we liked Hayashi's art and story overall. Another thing I don't think many people consider or think about is the work the localization team put into adapting manga for foreign markets, and in the case of Jump manga, the turnaround time for getting out a chapter is very short. Even so, I think Finn did an amazing job at drawing out and complementing Hayashi's work with some good lettering. The biggest thing that comes to mind is the font choice and positioning of N's dialogue and noises. They're often guttural, chaotic, and a contrast to the more uniform text we expect. Tons of other small subtle considerations are less obvious too, which can range from font size adjusting, like when people are shouting, to its boldness and positioning, but I can safely say that through reading MamaYuyu multiple times, the text itself aided in my reading experience. Localization can often be a contentious subject, and I'm not the most well versed in it, but I've read enough manga to where I think I can recognize when it's done well, and in cases like this, I think the people responsible should definitely be praised and acknowledged, so thank you David, Ian, Urian, and Finn, your work is appreciated. For avid readers of manga, a fun suggestion might be to keep an eye on how the text of a manga adds to your reading experience. There might be an extra level of appreciation there for you as you're reading a work. I hope all of this doesn't sound too preachy. I'm just very enthusiastic about the subject, and genuinely I think it adds to my enjoyment of the manga I love so much. Moving on from my general praise and analysis, let's discuss my thoughts on why it might have been axed. Of course, you have the usual, it had lower sales and buzz surrounding it compared to what Jump might have expected from a hit series. It doesn't help that there was a clear favourite from its batch, with Kagurabachi going on to become the next big thing, with it now being a front runner for the magazine. Looking at other manga in the magazine at the time, there are things I would have loved to see swapped out for it, like Kill Blue or Nue, but admittedly, they were doing better than it. Green Green Green's ending earlier alongside its batchmate Shadow Eliminators is another option that could have extended MamaYuyu's life, but that's a rough decision considering I love that series a lot too, and will be covering it soon in a future X-File. It's a shame there wasn't much wiggle room either, as big series like My Hero Academia and Jujutsu Kaisen would go on to end within the year, and Yozakura and Undead Unluck would end in early 2025, freeing up even more space. If you ask me what didn't work in MamaYuyu, which might have contributed to it being cancelled, perhaps people were taken with the action in other series more than it, and its romance wasn't focused on tremendously either, so it might not have drawn in people there. I actually struggled to find much wrong with it personally, so I think now is a good time to bring up the thoughts of others. Have I overlooked anything? Let's check out the messages we've received from the rest of the X-Files division. First off, I want to feature some common critiques or observations that people had which I didn't. One of the things you might often hear about MamaYuyu is about how its later introduced harem elements might have interrupted the story. Tower Dungeon Arc is an example of this, stating the harem nonsense wasn't for them and that it ended up being a disappointment, but plenty of others brought it up too as quick asides or reasons why they didn't enjoy the manga as much. There were people who thought it should have been taken further though, like Jesus Flash, who felt it should have embraced its romantic elements more, as they found them appealing and reminiscent of older rom-coms like Love Hina or Tenchi Muyo. Building onto what was already there, and which might have felt a bit out of place, could have led to it feeling more congruous overall. Hong touches on harem aspects in a different way, where they refute the idea of editorial meddling leading to them. It's nice to see this honestly, as a lot of people will blame editors or come up with conspiracies regarding the editors adding in certain elements to a series. I've seen more than a few people across the internet bring up this forced change to MamaYuyu. Here Hong brings up that no, this probably isn't the case, as if you look at the one-shots which I discussed earlier, they're all pretty heavy on the romance, and the Stickman one has its fair share of raunchy humor too, even bringing up To Love Ru as an analog within the one-shot. These are elements Hayashi has always played around with, and naturally they found their way into MamaYuyu. I think it's much safer to say they were planned than not. There are also those who didn't even register it having these elements in the first place. TG points out they didn't see much of the harem people point towards, which I think is valid and something worth speaking out on. I can't say for sure, but largely a lot of this might come from people who haven't read much harem manga. The only two real love interests for Corleo are actually Minerva and Alicia, and people might be conflating it with having a larger female cast with it having a harem. Overall, there were more perspectives than I anticipated here for this one topic, but I don't want to fully quell the idea that holding the opinion that harem elements dragged it down is invalid. Enough people brought it up, so it's worth considering. Perhaps it extends to something deeper though, and people weren't on board with the series' character dynamics. The romance aspects of the series weren't explored very deeply, so that shallowness there could explain why so many people hand-waved it away as being an attempt to bring in harem elements into the story. Another aspect that is often brought up as criticism when it comes to MamaYuyu is the involvement of Mamama. I brought this up earlier when discussing some of the series themes and how Coleo's heroic journey is paralleled with him wandering out of the nest for the first time and coming into his own. However, a substantial portion of commenters in the Discord and in general online feel that Mamama as a character was a wasted opportunity or was written out of the story. Like the harem element criticism, this is also something I don't want to fully dismiss, as clearly people had bigger expectations for Mamama and it's easy to see why. For one, she's on all the early art for the series, its first volume and its Shonen Jump cover. Another major reason is the name of the series, it being MamaYuyu. Things get a bit more complicated here though, as what the series name is referring to is heroes and demons more generally. The Ma from Mao, Demon Lord, and the Yu from Yusha, hero. Mamama then is a fun bit of wordplay relating to her being a Demon Lord and her being a mother figure as well. Within the series it does go on to explore Mamama a bit and shows her appearing periodically, but she's never a part of the main cast. While it does mention it, perhaps the manga didn't convey enough that Mamama isn't a fighter at all. She's weak, presumably doesn't know her sigil sorcery, too, since Halo shenanigans, and her role in the story is firmly Coleo's mother. How I see it is less her being written out of the story and more her taking on a role people didn't expect. She's always been there in the background, like Dahlia, Ash's mum in Pokemon, or your mother in Earthbound. She's at home worrying and waiting for Coleo. We get to hear her on the phone sometimes trying to figure out how Coleo is doing, which I find very cute, but she was never going to fight alongside him in the traditional sense, I feel. Upon rereading and thinking about the series considerably, I don't think you have to make any leaps in logic to think like this, but clearly people were expecting the opposite, and perhaps Hayashi could have done more to clarify this or make it more obvious what Mamama's role was in the story. Moving on to an interesting slate of comments I received, which I wasn't expecting, was many people likening MamaYuyu to My Hero Academia, which was ending around the same time as MamaYuyu was serializing. SDU mentions the series doing similar things to My Hero, perhaps in an attempt to be the next one of its ilk. Building on this, the Enuncipator also mentions MamaYuyu filling in My Hero's niche, describing its power system and exploration of good versus evil as similar. Kinky is another who brings up My Hero in relation to the similarities between Grisha and All for One. It makes some sense that an author might see an upcoming gap that could be filled in the magazine, so I get why someone could think this. There's certainly similarities between both manga as well. Since a handful of people brought it up, I thought it was worth mentioning. Now on to some people's more general thoughts, why some liked or disliked the series, and it was more mixed than I anticipated. For more critical reviews, we have Joni, who found it hard to care about the characters emotionally, which was in large part due to their frequent and fast introductions. It definitely lays them on thick, and I can totally understand any potential frustration people might have with how it juggled its cast. There's also a comment here about disliking Coleo and finding him embarrassing, especially when he's around the female cast. Plenty found him endearing or cute in a cringy sort of way as well, so this is perhaps a more polarizing aspect of the series. Melons critiques the cyclical nature of how it introduces characters and deals with its problems arc by arc, which is something that perhaps fed into the frustrations others had with its quick character introductions, with it being too formulaic in general. Fenrir Black had a range of criticisms too, but one I want to highlight is that they also felt it could have gone further with the different worlds and the races from those worlds being different, especially in a visual capacity. Could Hayashi have gone further with the designs? Since throughout the series it was talking about the differences between people, could you have made those more obvious or visually striking? These are questions definitely worth considering. Nedic's review was largely positive, and they had some great notes on how the series tackled its themes, but I want to touch on their dislike of how the bonus chapters made the ending worse for them. While many do cite the extra chapters as a welcome addition, here Netic mentions it muddling the story in part due to a larger focus on Grisha, who is by far the most nebulous aspect of the series. One review I had a fun time reading was from Just a Virus, and it came across that even though there was a lot they didn't like, with them actually prefacing that they were unsure of how negative they would be, they actually ended up praising the series quite a lot, alongside mentioning that the series had a lot of heart, characters were brought up positively, with Minerva being a big highlight. She was for a lot of people actually, and popped up in countless reviews as someone's favourite character. But beyond her, there's the rare mention of Just a Virus finding Grisha to be an enjoyable antagonist too. Segueing into the more positive reviews, Chut Frumpus largely praises it, especially the artwork, but wished it explored things more, its characters and where they came from. Despite having criticisms, they mention how emotional it did make them toward the end, and are extremely glad it existed at all. As much as I appreciate the critical feedback and other perspectives people take, it's always heartening to get reviews where it's clear that the series moved them. J Vaso, despite prefacing their review with something average that might be treading on a lot of common ground that other people have said already, was one of the most concise I received, and I like how they engaged with the story and its themes. They explore some of the positive aspects a lot of fans of the series will cite, it being energetic and stylish and full of heart. I like that they bring up the amusement park arc, which is full of character building where the cast get to goof off. If you do like these characters, which many do, parts of the story like this are equally as standout as some of the bigger action set pieces. One last thing from J Vaso I loved is how they viewed the ending portions and the actions of End in Halo Halo, describing it as a commentary on how the existence of powerful tools inherently leads to violence. Halo Halo removes these tools and attains a peaceful world state in Collier's world, while in the world of Citrus and End, just because the sigils exist, aka super weapons, people commit atrocities to attain them. There's clear parallels there to our world and how we've treated weaponry, and it's an instance of MamaYuyu exploring the ideas of conflict many other stories do in a small but effective way beyond just the main characters fighting. As always, I really appreciate the reviews and comments left by people for these videos. I find it very enriching to hear other people's thoughts, and I think it makes me a better person and writer after I get to sit down and contemplate what everyone has said. I hope this section can convey that to you and provide you with elements you might not have considered when approaching this series, and I compel people to further discuss aspects of MamaYuyu in the comments. Just be open-minded. After MamaYuyu would end, Hayashi wouldn't stop with more MamaYuyu immediately releasing, coinciding with the volume releases, which we've already covered. Once again, I do want to point out that there is more to this story if you read it as it was coming out weekly, which includes 5 new chapters. These substantially change the ending and wrap everything up, with the page count actually adding up to over 100 new pages. Whether Hayashi did these concurrently with MamaYuyu or after, I'm not sure. Perhaps they were boarded alongside the other chapters, but they didn't fit in during the cancellation timeframe. This, I feel, is a pretty rare situation though. Often artists might give 1 or 2 extra chapters as an epilogue outside of Jump, and even then it's usually something more established authors do as bonuses. 5 extra chapters is something you do if you sincerely love what you've made. Sure, it is an incentive for fans to buy the volumes, but this is totally more than something done out of simple financial gain. Something I want to bring up alongside this is every single one of Hayashi's volume notes is about their love for drawing, and you can feel it in every single page. The manga is so fun and creative. Hayashi loves making things, and the way they handle this story's conclusion only solidifies this to me. Never mind how ridiculously well drawn and full of love the rest of the series is. After MamaYuyu's proper conclusion, Hayashi would return half a year later with the one-shot in Jump Plus in January of 2025, Doku wo Haku, or Self-Reflection. This is described as a soliloquy and focuses on Masamichi Watanabe, a mangaka, and you get to follow his life and thoughts intimately. It has no reservations in talking about all sorts of troubles and issues that surround manga creation, from editorial crushing your dreams, your work ethic being unsustainable, and the intense pressure to be constantly creating. It's scathing and mind-bending, likely being at least semi-autobiographical from Hayashi, and I think it does a great job at making you think about your place in the world, your dreams and goals. And most recently, in March of 2025, we got the one-shot My Sister, My Stuck Butt, and Me, which brings things back to a light-hearted place again. This is such a silly one-shot that sees two sisters, Mari and Yui, navigate their relationship, but the younger sister Mari ends up getting her butt stuck in a wall which houses an alternate dimension. It's Hayashi firing on all cylinders. It's silly, heartfelt, and of course very well drawn. This one has an official release too, which you can read on Manga Plus, which I heartily recommend, and we'll try to link in the comments. So, despite MamaYuyu getting cancelled, it received a lot of extra love that I think made it a pretty satisfying story overall. It's something I and many others will look back on fondly for a variety of reasons, ranging from its art, characters, and general premise. For a first Shonen Jump, it was amazing, and I can't wait to see what Hayashi does next, whether it be more one-shots, a new series, or something else. This video can be my way of summoning him back. And with that, this long axe file on MamaYuyu comes to a close. Thank you so much for sticking around till here, and if this is your first video from me, I have a ton of axe files on other cancelled Shonen Jump manga, ranging from newer series you might be familiar with to some much older ones. If you also want to hear me talk about manga and Shonen Jump in a broader sense, I have plenty of other videos on the channel too, like my History of Shonen Jump series, where I go through the magazine year by year, looking into what series came out in those years, which includes some of the most popular manga in the world, and some very obscure things you just can't read in English. If you really like my work on this video, consider liking and sharing it around. This one in particular took a ton of time and effort to make, and without the support I've already received, I'm not sure this would have been as in-depth as it was. A huge reason for all of this is because of the Patreon, and if you'd like to go the extra mile, for as little as $1 you can get access to polls to decide future axe files, and there's also some bonus videos there too, with my first impressions on some of Shonen Jump's newest manga. The money can help go to things like helping me afford throat lozenges for long recording sessions like this, where I've been yapping for over an hour on this one series. One more thing about the Patreon is if you join at the $3 tier or higher, you'll also get a custom little doodle to represent you in the credits, like all of these cool people. Thank you. Trinity, Jade, Kazuku Gairu, Sorako Zero, Holly the Apothecary, Mayu, It's Fakeo, Yellowtail, Lay Sloggett, Crispy Bacon, Shohenshin, Full Metal, Unquestionable, Yozakura Psycho, Wuzzle, Violent, Cactus, Joni, City Name E, Vina Burrito, Caffeine Dad, Cryonaut, Crash, Footy One Eye Z, Hong, Jamie Reynolds, Manu, Poke Emblem, James Miller, Chopa Monkey, Just a Virus, Star Sphinx, PK Broly, Fenrir Black, Elijah Espinoza, Neo Humanoid, Mark Nielsen, Electro Pirate, Jay Vasso, Three Frogs in a Trenchcoat, Sir Flash, Gay Shark, Slimy Okra, Gidista, TG Talks Manga, Wavy Sky, John Jerry 722, Andrew, Zenomat, Hilltop, Vaco Draws, Otaku Gamer X, Deadpan, Shy Monkeys, Jonathan Dragonet, John Sanford, Color, Jaime, Strawberry Proshone, Vaz, Palette, Ruina, Juice, Kuromi Nox, Eric Gorski, Mr. Shira, Grizz Exploder, Dextora, Ennio Shovo, Cheese, and Emmy. Thank you all so much for being patrons. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Remember to be kind and take care.